Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, how about this? Are we preparing well enough our students and our citizens to be STEM workforce ready? We'll get to that in a minute, but first, another Pennsylvania lawmaker. I know you won't find this, you'll be surprised by this, faces sexual abuse allegations. We're going to check in with Jan Murphy from PennLive and the Patriot News. She's written a story about it, and we'll do that and some other things back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, welcome back to the show. Well, we have a number of important items to cover. Sitting across from me is Jan Murphy. She's been on the program before. She writes a good bit about education for PennLive. What's up, Patriot News? How can I forget that? And the fact of the matter is Jan has written a couple of very, very important stories. All right, let's start with a state representative named Miccarelli from Delaware County. And he's been in the legislature for a while. And all of a sudden there are these sexual abuse allegations. And it goes a little bit beyond harassment. So what are the allegations and who made them?
Okay, well, Terry, first I want to fully credit the Philadelphia Inquirer and the caucus for reporting this yesterday. And they, it is some very serious allegations that are being made by two women who Representative Miccarelli dated at one point. But it's, you know, they filed a complaint with the House of Representatives saying he violated the workplace harassment policy. Representative Miccarelli has vehemently, denied these allegations. I understand he put on Facebook that, why didn't they go to the police? In the Inquirer's, in the caucus report, they had indicated that the women were in fear for putting their careers in jeopardy as well as their lives.
Let me stop you here. You've covered some of these in the past. That seems to me to be an overriding theme every time you get into this issue, that the women are fearful that if they reach out to somebody, that their careers are over. I mean, how many times have you
That's kind of been the basis of the whole Me Too movement, is that finally women are feeling emboldened because we're coming out in numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's an important movement.
So we do know, okay, he's denied these charges. I'm going to get to a comment he made that's very controversial and, in fact, has created another kind of blowback, if you will. But the fact of the matter is Governor Wolf has already called for him to resign. And as you and I speak, there's a press conference with the Democrats up on the Hill. And my hunch is they're going to call for him to resign as well. I'd be surprised if they didn't. But there is another aspect of this that I think is really interesting and not what we've seen before. And I'm going to read you a quote. Now, this quote comes from him. He goes on to deny the allegations, correct?
Yes.
There's no problem with that. I'm innocent and as you point out, he says, if there was something to this, you would have come back a long time ago. And
went to the police, right.
Great point. So here's what he has said. If you choose to ignore the truth, this is Miccarelli, you do so at your own peril.
That is the statement that he made to the reporters. And from the Capitol Police, who have been advised of that statement, they now are involved. And yesterday they confirmed that they are involved because of this threatening statement made to the reporters.
Yeah, the other thing is I think one of the nervousness, and I take it that this is also in the reporting, that there's concerns by some of the women that he might be, a carry a weapon, a gun. Now, and that may have added something to their concern as well.
I understand that in their complaint that they made to the House, that they not only requested that Representative Miccarelli resign, but also be barred from carrying a firearm into the Capitol complex.
Wow. And as you know, you can't you and I couldn't go in and carry a firearm, but members can. Is that correct?
Well,
my understanding. Or is it confusing?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I have a Capitol Access badge because I work in the Capitol newsroom, and if I had a concealed permit, I could go, because I don't have to go through security to go in. So I think that anybody that has those access badges clearly.
But somebody like me or any of our viewers, if you walk in,
right? Yeah,
you go through the
security
screening process when you get there, and they're pretty tough about that.
But to get one of those access badges, to be clear, I mean, I have to go through a criminal background check every year to make sure that I can keep my access.
So overall, I guess there's going to be I mean, are we at the point where the folks who've reported this, who had this, when they were quizzing him about this at a press conference, I take it, or I don't know if it was ad hoc, that with Miccarelli, the press that approached him, I don't know. It doesn't matter.
I think it was just an interview
Just
situation.
an interview. Yeah, it doesn't matter what the forum was. Are they going to have to beef up security for members of the press corps, that you folks that work up there and cover the Capitol? Is that some concern that you all have had as reporters now?
I mean, to be honest, this happened yesterday.
I know, so you're
trying to process it.
Yeah.
And, certainly, I always felt that if someone would want to come after a reporter for a story that they wrote, they would be the first person that law enforcement would look at. So
yeah, you're right. Now, if you've been there, you've covered Capitol for a couple of decades. Have you ever been, and your colleagues, because you got folks been in fear at all for what you've written?
We definitely, and I personally have had some instances where people have threatened me in certain ways.
I know what you mean.
And you just
all right, I put Jan on the spot, but I mean, this is important. We can't have the press corps of the country threatened and intimidated. That's not going to work. And we can disagree with what reporters write, but we can't go that far. And I just want to bring it out in the public that that's something that we all ought to condemn, and given the work that you do. All right, we're going to run to a break. Arming teachers, is that any way to secure schools? Now, I didn't make this up. This is a title that comes from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we'll talk to Jan about that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, I'm chatting with Jan Murphy from PennLive and the Patriot News. Now, Jan covers the education beat. So here we go. Given what's happened down in Broward County, Florida, there's a lot of concern about whether teachers should be armed, and other proposals in state legislatures as well as in Congress. I noticed that school administrators and teachers had issued a press conference where no, they don't want teachers to be armed. What have you been hearing on Capitol about any of these issues, and whether or not there's likely to be any change?
Well, it's certainly an issue that's going to get further discussion in light of the Parkland High School shooting. But just so you know, I mean, there was legislation that Senator Don White out of Indiana County had introduced, and not in response to the Parkland shooting, but he said that's kind of renewed his interest in pushing harder to get this arming teachers, arming school employees, I should say, legislation passed. And he introduced it in response to a mass stabbing that happened out in Allegheny County at a high school. And his argument is, out in his county, the state police barracks is like 35 to 45 minutes away from some of the schools. And he said, his legislation would allow, it wouldn't mandate, allow school districts to have a policy to allow school employees to be armed. And it does require training. His legislation also currently requires a psychological evaluation of employees, and it would have to be voluntary. And he said even if just one school did it, he wants to give them that option. He believes that it would be a deterrent.
You know, it's given the reaction from the school community, and you know, I've been in education my whole life, I must tell you a certain nervousness about having a lot of guns in the classroom. I'm not enamored with it, and I know, you know, we can have differing views on it. Having trained officers and personnel, you know, on different floors in buildings makes a lot more sense to me, but that's neither here nor there. But I guess the bottom line is, and you've covered this, a lot of education issues, this doesn't seem likely to go very far. I could be wrong. I mean,
well, Governor Wolf has said he would definitely veto it without questions. But it made it through the House or the Senate by a 28-22 vote. There was one Democrat who supported it and a few Republicans who opposed it. So
mostly along partisan lines, however.
Mostly, yes.
But you bring up a good point. We forget the geography of our state. And this broad swath of you know, rural and small towns spread, you know, and getting
protected by the state police.
Yeah, and it's how long for the police and others to get there. So you understand that it could be a fairly long period of time, and I think that's a legitimate concern that folks have, right? And you've probably heard that.
Right, but I think that there's certainly the school organizations, you know, believe that having an armed guard or armed security officers is the way to go, and they just want the state to pony up the money to pay for it.
Well, thanks for coming in. Great update here. Unfortunately, these are topics we both wish we didn't have to talk about. All right, coming up, we're back to STEM workforce education. What's it mean? This is an important topic. It's a lot about the future employment, something that Jan can write about on education, and we'll be back in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back to the program, where we're going to talk about STEM workforce education and how ready are we to deal with what obviously is an important aspect of our economy. Joining me, sitting across from me, I should say, is Dr. Christine Royce. She's the president-elect of the National Science Teachers Association. She's at Shippensburg University. And Jeff Remington, he's National STEM Teacher Ambassador. We folks in education have long titles. I thought the folk in the business community did. All right, Jeff, let's start out with, I want to ask you, what is STEM education? And then I'm going to start with you. Why is it important? And then we're going to go to some other aspects of it. Go ahead. What is it?
Well, STEM education takes the disciplines of science, technology, engineering, and math, and instead of treating them as separate silos, it treats them as an integrated discipline where you're solving problems, you're learning about things through 4 different lenses, sort of simultaneously, and along with that comes some soft skills of engineering design process, growth mindset, those types of things.
And that, when you get out into, let me turn to you, Christine. When you get out into the workforce, those aspects all get blended and merged anyway in your employment, or am I on Mars?
No, you're actually right, and that's the important part of why STEM education is important. We don't teach the way people have to use skills in the future. Right now we teach separate subjects, and by integrating STEM, We're preparing people to actually work in the future, work in corporations, especially in the STEM fields, which are growing. By 2020, there's supposed to be increases in STEM education fields in Pennsylvania and nationwide.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it seems like I was going to say it's the wave, it's the future, but no, it's here now, right?
It is totally here now,
And
right? There's shortages today
jobs,
in this state for jobs.
Now look, we're in higher ed, you're in basic education. Is this something that the aspects of teaching of it needs to begin? Let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elementary
I think foundationally it has to be a K-12 initiative. It has to be pervasive. It has to be resourced. A great way to start, I believe, is through something called the Next Generation Science Standards, which are standards that teach to the concept of STEM, where there's integration of science, of math, of engineering, and of technology. Instead of being taught as separate subject silos, there is integrations. 20 states in the United States currently have those adopted. Pennsylvania, it does not have them adopted.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to get to that. But how are we? Just to pick up on what Jeff said, are we at a point where this needs to be much more fully integrated in schools at all levels?
It does. It needs to start in basic education, in K-12 classes, where students are starting to develop those problem-solving thinking skills young. We can start with the basic skills, and then we increase them and scaffold them as we come up and help them learn how to think that way as they develop. They'll encounter a lot of things in their daily lives that they can apply these skills to.
All right, I'm going to ask you because you're in higher education, and so am I, so we both could get into trouble with this. Is this a sense that not everybody needs to go and get a 4-year degree in a college, that they can adapt and find it in technical and vocational areas, and or the colleges and universities need to put some aspects of that into their curriculum? I know that Slippery Rock University out in western Pennsylvania has already started that. What's your sense about that?
Well, as a college professor, I think everybody needs some kind of post-secondary education. It doesn't have to be a 4-year liberal arts degree, though. But we do have to have people going to school to learn to work in trade areas, in STEM fields. Students who start in mechanics, that's a STEM field right now. Students who start in construction need to understand integrated concepts of STEM. So we need to have them all prepared for the future. That doesn't always mean 4-year liberal arts degree.
I mean, the point is, it's not either or. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the liberal arts because, you know, I'm at a liberal arts institution, but even when I was on the faculty at Millersville, you know, we trained teachers. We also had, you know, a strong liberal arts program. I never thought it was either or. I mean, you know, for some people what's, you know, appropriate is, for others maybe not, right?
A big part of STEM is creativity, the creative design process. So some schools call it STEAM. Was just over in the United Arab Emirates, they call it STREAM. But arts are very important in the STEM process.
All right. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about specifically what's going on in our state, what proposals are there, and what's likely to happen, legislature and the governor, and we'll see where all this goes, and we'll see you back here in a moment or two.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, we're talking about STEM education, and I'm going to start with you, Christine, because we ended with your partner there, Jeff. All right, let's start with this. What's going on in the Pennsylvania legislature with regards to increasing resources for STEM education and or programmatic changes?
Well, most recently, the governor did put money into his budget, his proposed budget, associated with increasing STEM in computer education in the state. There's also a push for STEM topics as they relate to career education and workforce readiness. So there is a push, and legislators are talking about the need to increase STEM, but we'd like to see a more concerted, focused need on STEM itself, not this broad approach to hitting all topics that might be of interest.
Yeah, there's something here that you sent me. It's called, "Here are important needs to expand K-12 STEM and PA."
Yeah, some things we need to do for K-12 STEM and PA. Again, there needs to be a pervasive, resourced policy or policies so that when people walk into a classroom, they know that STEM's going on. And I think a great way to do that is to revamp our science and technology standards. Standards are not curriculum. Standards are like a guiding compass.
Good point, yeah.
And we have available to us something called the Next Generation Science Standards that teach science, technology, engineering, and math as an integrated subject like you would see in a career field.
Oh, yeah.
If we start that early on, that would be great. We're one of the few holdout states that don't have that.
You're in the education school
Yes.
at Ship, right?
Yes, I am.
I have to ask you this. Does that mean when we have teacher training programs wherever they're taught, and they're taught in many places, does that mean the whole way that we train teachers and what we train them to do through the educational process needs to be changed as well?
I think it needs to be adapted to incorporate the Next Generation Science Standards. And I would argue that the majority of science educators, STEM educators, already incorporate those into their curriculum because they're aware of them.
Oh, so you think the change is taking place already, and now it's just a question of getting the resources?
I think there's avenues of change where students coming out know about the Next Generation Science Standards, teachers in classrooms know about the Next Generation Science Standards. So they realize the importance of these and they're incorporating them where possible, but they're still bound to the existing state standards and the existing tests.
That's a good point. Now, when you deal with this at the legislative level, I mean, we all know what happened to the governor's budget and how long it took to come up with $2.2 billion. The budget was the shortfall, the deficit in the budget. When you talk to either one of you can, or both of you, when you talk to lawmakers, what's their response? It would seem to me that this would cross party lines. I don't see any partisan dimension to this at all.
Absolutely. It is a bipartisan buy-in to this. They think it's very important. But I think what we're seeing so far are things that don't cost a lot of political capital, a lot of after-school programs, things like that, but they don't impact all the students across K-12 spectrum in Pennsylvania. The standards we're currently using are older than the first rollout of the iPhone by 5 years. We need new standards.
Oh yeah, I get it. And so are we going to ultimately have tests that evaluate whether this works? You get the final question.
If we move to the Next Generation Science Standards, we would need to also adapt our tests because the tests would need to be authentic, that have the students show their ability to integrate ideas and engage with those fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Not just simply go about filling in factual information.
All right, well look, I think this is wonderful. I want to thank you for coming in. This is a hugely important topic, and as this progresses, give us a call and you can come back on. We'll have to see, given the debate over the budget, but education, this is truly important. I'm supposed to be neutral. It's hard to be neutral on this. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.